all of these great books coming out, but then you think, girl, the tariffs. Welcome to a late night video. I am gonna try to be talking quieter than usual because it's literally almost 2 a.m. Do not ask me about my horrible time management and my horrible sleep schedule. We don't have time to get into that. Instead, what we will get into is this year's Asian Readathon. If you are new here, the Asian Readathon is basically a month-long reading marathon dedicated to reading books by Asian authors. It's basically an online event that is meant to be very easy and accessible for everyone. Every year, the Asian Readathon takes place during the month of May because that is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, but obviously it doesn't have to be just those two ethnic groups. Anyone from all over the world can join because it is an online event, and again, it's meant to be super accessible and easy for anyone who is just looking to diversify their reading list. So I'll dive more into the rules, but really all the information that you need to know is going to be linked in my Google Doc in the description. I'm going to go into the reading challenges. I'll mention a couple of read-alongs and book clubs that you can participate, and I'll talk about the directory of Asian books that I put together, that it's all community-based. It's hosted on a wonderful site called Storygraph, where people in the community can add book recommendations based on author ethnicity or reading prompts for this year's challenges or other kinds of categories that you might find relevant. So if you are looking for new books to check out or discover or new authors to discover, this is a great resource that you can all find in the Google Doc with all of the links below. So if you are incentivized to checking out more books and perhaps building your own collection, we could always use a little extra budget when it comes to expanding our libraries. Which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, FreeCash. FreeCash is an online platform where users from all over the world can sign up for free and make money online simply by playing mobile games from different categories. I feel like I always see tons of different apps that boast about this kind of stuff, but I did notice that FreeCash has 4.5 stars on Trustpilot, which made me more inclined to check them out. I found that I tend to gravitate towards games where I can just turn off my brain and I'm only challenged like slightly a little bit to my own comfort level, and that has been Matchmaster. That's been my favorite game so far because it's been so easy for me to learn, and it's really easy to be doing it in my spare time. So whenever I am commuting from work or I'm watching TV in the background, cashing out is super easy as well. I just link to my PayPal and then I can process it directly to my account. You can click on the link in my description or check out the QR code in the corner. This will give you a $5 cash bonus on your first offer started. Thank you to FreeCash for sponsoring, and now let's get back to the video. So let's get into this year's challenge. And for some context, I started applying a theme to these challenges every year, and usually they would be based around relevant Asian media that has come out within the past year or so. But when I was looking at like 2024, 2025, it was hard to like pinpoint a specific film that was like universally known by a lot of people. And so I want to try something a little bit different this year, where I will have 5 different reading challenges for us to tackle this year. And each of those challenges are going to be inspired by a notable Asian film that came out within this past year. So let's get into the first reading challenge, which is inspired by Ne Zha 2, the sequel to a Chinese animated fantasy action adventure film. And this was actually the highest grossing film in a single box office territory, and globally became the highest grossing animated film and the first animated film in history to cross the $2 billion mark. It also ranks as the highest grossing film of 2025, the 5th highest grossing film of all time, and the animated film with the most tickets sold. So considering that this is an animated fantasy action adventure film, the first challenge is going to be to read a book written by an Asian author that is a fantasy and or a bestseller. So that way you don't have to limit yourself to just a fantasy. If you are not into that, you can go into whatever is a bestseller out there. Fantasy can also be broad as well. You could count that within sci-fi or just speculative fiction in general, or if it has some magical realism aspects. I want this to be as accessible as possible. So by no means should you feel like you're limited to a very specific thing. The second reading challenge is based on The Wedding Banquet, which is a movie movie that has just recently come out is an American romantic comedy film, but it's actually a remake of the 1993 film in Korea. This remake stars Bowen Yang, Lily Gladstone, and Kelly Marie Tran, so very prolific Asian actors, and it's about a gay man who proposes a green card marriage to his female friend in exchange for paying for her IVF treatment. But then things get complicated when his grandmother surprises them with plans for a very extravagant Korean wedding banquet. If you watch the trailer, you can see how it's very Asian and very queer. And so I feel like it's very fitting for the second challenge to be read a book written by an Asian author that is a retelling and or features LGBT plus characters. The third challenge is based on the film How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. This is a Thai comedy drama film that is about a university dropout who is low on money, and therefore he volunteers to take care of his terminally ill grandmother in the hopes of pocketing an inheritance. This film actually went viral last year because there was a social media trend where viewers posted videos of themselves crying after watching the film. The theaters would often pass out tissue boxes prior to you getting seated and getting ready to watch it. And this was very unexpected. The people who worked on this film did not anticipate it blowing up as much as it did. And this is considered a very atypical box office hit for Thai cinema, because usually, based on my research, people in Thai theaters have typically favored like horror or action or slapstick comedy films. And so this was the first time that a film that has like a lot of emotional weight and drama made a really big splash. So for that reason, the third reading challenge is to read a book written by an Asian author that is emotional and or features an older character. The fourth challenge is based on the film All We Imagine as Light. This was a drama film that came out last year, and it features Malayalam, Hindi, and Marathi dialogue, which means that this was an international co-production involving companies from France, India, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and Italy. The film had its world premiere at the 77th Cannes Film Festival last year in the month of May, and it actually won the Grand Prix award there. This was a really big deal because this was the first film from India to compete in the main competition since 1994. However, when it came to the Oscars, this film was not selected to be submitted by either France or India. So this was kind of controversial because a lot of people believed that the film should have been at least nominated for the Oscars, especially considering the international reception, and a lot of people had hoped that India would be a serious contender for the Oscars in the Best Foreign Films category. So that was a disappointment to not see them featured. And so for that reason, the reading challenge for this is to read a book written by an Asian author that is international, meaning that it is non-English, but maybe it was like translated to your language, or it is just from a different country than yours, depending on where you're from. And or this book should have been considered for awards, in your opinion. Again, we're keeping it very broad. It is open to your interpretation, so make of it of what you will. And then the last challenge is inspired by No Other Land, which is a film that did win the Oscars recently. This film won the Best Documentary Feature Film at the Oscars, which is a huge deal because a lot of times in Hollywood, people like to tiptoe around Palestine and not really talk about what's going on over there. So the fact that we had a documentary that was explicitly showing the destruction and occupation of the West Bank, and also showing the alliance that was developing between the Palestinian activists and Israeli journalists that were featured in the film, was just something that I would have never expected the Oscars or any like mainstream media to cover at all. So four activists had put together this film in what they describe as an act of resistance on the path to justice. Therefore, the last reading challenge is to read a book written by an Asian author that is nonfiction and or political. And political can mean a lot of things. It can literally mean political with some kind of global or regional conflict, or it could still be political within the fictional narrative that you're reading. Like a lot of fantasy books can be political, for example. Or you could read a contemporary book where the character is struggling with some kind of social issue that would be considered political. Again, it is totally open to interpretation. Another thing to note to make it easy for you is that you can combine these challenges and read in any order. That means you could literally read one or two books and have them combine several of the challenges at once, and that can still be considered you completing the Asian Readathon. The one thing that I do ask for you to consider though is that each book you read should feature a character or author of a different Asian ethnicity. And this is just to encourage cultural diversity. There are so many different Asian subgroups out there, and we're not just talking about East Asians, who are typically the most represented minority group when it comes to Asian media. We're talking Central Asians, Hawaii and Pacific Islands, Southeast Asia, South Asia, even West Asia, or commonly referred to as the Middle East. So for those of you who are wondering what counts as Asian, this organization has a list that I will also just put on screen for you. And as you can see from this list, there are so many different subgroups and ethnic groups. So you will be in no short supply of finding different types of Asians to read and learn from. And before you get too intimidated by trying to find a whole bunch of different books to read, again, you can totally combine the challenges. Just try to make each book that you do read representative of a different ethnic background. So for example, I could read a book by a Vietnamese author to combine the challenges 1, 2, and 3. But then if I read a second book that is trying to combine challenges 4 and 5, but the author is also Vietnamese, that doesn't really count because I basically only read like one type of Asian group the whole time. So if I'm going to read a second book for Asian Readathon, it should be a different group other than Vietnamese. It is also going to be easy for you to find book recommendations because I have set up a page on Storygraph, which makes it a really easy way for people to add book recommendations based on author ethnicity. So if you would like to contribute to this list, all you got to do is start a Storygraph account to add the books to their respective prompts. But even if you are just like a casual viewer, you don't necessarily need to start your own account. You can just view it in the link that I have in my description. But I would very much appreciate it if you do contribute to the list if you know of any books that you think would match the prompts, because this is all community contributed, and the more people that volunteer to recommend different books that they know of, the better it is for other people to discover books. If you need a walkthrough to navigate the site, I will post a clip from my previous video that goes into that. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so you know what I'm talking about. Basically, I started the reading challenge for Asian Readathon. Anyone can join it. I have all these sections listed out. They're called challenge prompts on the website, but I'm actually cheating it a little bit so that I can use it as just like general book recommendations, because each section is divided by different author ethnicity. And as you can see, there are a bunch of books added to each section. If you scroll down past all of the ethnicities, you also can see that I added LGBTQ plus authors, nonfiction books, graphic novels, books translated from their native language. So you have different categories too if you're looking for inspiration for a certain reading prompt. I really like this because if you click on any section, you can see all the book covers and the tags that are listed along each book, so that gives you a general idea of whether you're interested in the book or not. If you have a bunch of Asian books that you want to add to the list, please do. Once you make an account on Storygraph, all you have to do is first join the Asian Readathon challenge. You can just do that by clicking on the link in my Google Doc or in my video description. And then after you join it, type any book that you want to add to the list. So for example, I am going to search up In the Vanisher's Palace, which is by a Vietnamese author, and it's also LGBTQ+, according to the tag. I'm on the book page, I scroll down, and on the left side, it says add to your reading challenge. I click on Asian Readathon. Now I see all these categories. So I'm gonna search Vietnamese authors, so I can add that, and I'm gonna search LGBTQ+ authors. Then you click on Save Changes. Now, when you look at the page, you can see that the book is added there. And now other people can see the book is listed in those categories, and they might be interested in picking it up too. I encourage everyone to join me in adding all of these books because I think we can build like a massive directory that is super comprehensive. Something that I will also have linked in my Google Doc is a bunch of reading clubs and groups that you can join online through Twitter or Instagram or Discord that focus specifically on reading Asian books, or maybe they're general book clubs, but they decide to read Asian books during the month of May for Asian Readathon. So if you would like like to read with another buddy or have other people to discuss the book with, you can check out the list to see if you want to join any of these clubs. And then lastly, I want to end this video by talking about new books by Asian authors coming out in 2025. I've talked about a couple of them in my anticipated books video, but I want to talk about other books that I hadn't gotten to cover. This is really just my excuse to plug some more books for you to check out. And a lot of them aren't even going to be released in the month of May, like they might be released later on in the year. But I feel like this is something where you don't need to be limited to just the month of May. You can continue reading diversely and widely as possible for the rest of the year because it's fun. That's how you don't get bored of reading the same stuff over and over again. One of the books that is at the top of my radar for this year is gonna be House of the Beast, and this is a dark fantasy debut from the graphic novel illustrator of Legend of Korra. So not only does the book sound interesting, there's also gonna be black and white illustrations throughout the book by the author herself. Basically, it's about a young woman who strikes a deal with a mysterious and alluring god to seek revenge on her aristocratic family. So the vibes are very much vibing over here. But again, I must complain that it is not fair for authors to be talented at something other than writing. You need to only be good at one thing and save the talent for the rest of us. And then a book that came out recently is Restaurant Kid. This author is the daughter of immigrant parents who devoted their entire life to their family restaurant. She talks about what it was like to be a restaurant kid because obviously this is like a huge achievement for these parents who had to flee China after the Japanese occupation and then also survive the bombings and starvation during the war in Vietnam. So for them to set up this business in Canada was a huge deal. But there's also the downside of a lot of pain and suffering that she's witnessed with a bunch of screaming matches and bodies that get worn down by arthritis. And so it just sounds like a very emotionally poignant experience, and her love for her family and the cross-generational experience that you have of like finding yourself and building your life in a new country. There's a very buzzy book coming out later this year called Nightblood Prince. This is a romantasy that focuses on two kingdoms that are on the brink of battle. The main character is an empress that is supposed to unite the two kingdoms together, but then she finds herself caught in a love triangle between two princes. And then on top of all of that messiness, there's also an army of deadly vampires. So it just sounds like a bunch of chaotic fun for a romantasy, especially one that is inspired by historical China. A really creepy one coming out is called They Bloom at Night. This takes place in Louisiana, where this town has been overtaken by a strange red algae bloom. So the main character and her mother are trying to survive the mutated wildlife that's lurking in the water. And the story begins when the harbor master demands that she captures the creature that's been drowning the residents. I think you can tell just from the cover alone that it looks very creepy and atmospheric. Another one coming out is called For No Mortal Creature, and this is about a teenage girl who has the power of resurrection, and now she has to venture into the afterlife/death realm. But in order to survive making that kind of journey, she has to recruit the help of her two mortal enemies that she also happens to be very much drawn to. I don't know if this is going to be like a love triangle situation, but it's definitely a very romantic gothic fantasy that's inspired, but it's essentially a romantic gothic fantasy that's inspired by Wuthering Heights. There's a speculative novel coming out called 10 Incarnations of Rebellion. This takes place in an alternate version of 1960s India that had never been liberated from the British. The main character and some of her other allies basically form this new independence movement in the city that they're living in that's currently occupied by the British. They start to work jobs for the British while secretly planning to destroy the empire from the inside out. This book is also set over the course of a decade, and it's told as 10 moments from the main character's life that mirror the 10 avatars of Vishnu. To me, this sounds like it's gonna be like a modern classic. It sounds very sweeping, very empowering, and the whole format of it just sounds so unique. So those are some of the buzzy books coming from Asian authors this year. I hope that you are excited for a couple of them coming out, and if you have some books already in mind that you plan on reading for this year's Asian Readathon, definitely let me know in the comments. Maybe we can find other recommendations together as well. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching, and also thank you to FreeCash again for sponsoring this video. Again, it's super easy to sign up with my link or my QR code, and if you sign up, you get a $5 bonus. Who doesn't like free money? Especially in this economy, all of these great books coming out, but then you think, girl, the tariffs. I have like 5 different library cards, and I will be bothering every single library to stock these books. All right, I'm gonna try to fix my sleep schedule now, so hopefully by next time we will see natural light. Until then, goodbye. And patience is a piece